Peter Pan presents The Legend of Mulan.
The classic story of Mulan was first told in China many generations ago in a poem titled Mulan Chi. While the story itself is ancient, the courage and bravery of the young woman at the center of it is timeless. The story begins when leaders of neighboring lands sent warring tribes, called Tartars, into China. Their goal was to conquer the people of China and make the land part of their empire. With desperation to raise an army, the Emperor of China sent messengers into all the towns and villages. Your help is needed. One man from every home must join and fight. If not, everyone in that household will be severely punished. In Mulan's home, there lived her father and mother, older sister, and brother, who was just a little boy. That left Mulan's father as the only man in the household, so it was his job to join the army and to go to war. Mulan knew her father had once been a soldier, but that was many years ago. While he was willing to fight for the emperor, his skills had faded in time. Mulan stepped forward and told him, "Father, I will go in your place." At first, Mulan's parents would not even hear of her going in her father's place. "You have taught me the art of battle well," Mulan replied to her father. "And the only way to save our family is if a man from our home steps forward to fight for the emperor." Mulan cut her hair. She put on her father's heavy armor, equipped herself with his bow and arrows, and strapped on his sword. She looked just like a man and a warrior. Mulan said goodbye to her family, giving her word that she would honor them and would return home safely. Mulan went to the capital city of Luoyang, near the Yellow River. At the emperor's palace, she joined many men from villages all over China. They were busy training for battle, and no one suspected that in their midst was a woman who would fight alongside them. Mulan and her fellow soldiers spent a lot of time training and drilling to learn and improve their fighting skills. This is something Mulan did quite well because of the training she had received from her father. An officer in the army, General Zhang, noticed how well she did. One day, General Zhang assembled the troops and stood before them. "Men of China, our enemy, the Tartars, continue to cross our northern border. They have divided into different armies. Tomorrow, we meet one of those armies in battle." As the sun rose the next day, Mulan felt afraid. She took some time in her tent to put on the armor and take up the sword of her father. Father, guide my hand as it holds your sword. Give me the strength and wisdom to save our land and bring honor to our family. In a valley between two mountains, the emperor's army met a large and savage army of the invaders. At the sound of trumpets and shouts from the officers, Mulan and her fellow soldiers charged. The fighting was fierce. Many good men fell, and one good woman fought on. As the tide of battle went back and forth, General Zhang found himself fighting alongside this special soldier. He couldn't help but notice the soldier's skill and courage. At the end of this very long day, the flag of the emperor still stood, and the Chinese army had won this fierce battle. General Zhang praised his soldiers, especially Mulan. You fought bravely. Where are you from? I am from the house of Mulan Qi, Mulan replied proudly. Only during the few times when she was alone could Mulan remove the armor and helmet, which concealed that she was a woman. She looked at her worn hands and a face dirty from battle, and thought of her family and home. I do this for them, Mulan told herself. There were a number of Tartar armies invading the homeland of China. In the weeks and months that followed, Mulan and her fellow soldiers found themselves engaged in many battles. Again and again, Mulan demonstrated her skill and courage. Soldiers began to see her as a leader. General Zhang and other officers of the emperor's army were impressed by Mulan. They promoted her in rank, placing more men under her command. All the while, never suspecting that this exceptional warrior was a young woman. When the general offered Mulan a special sword, she said, "Thank you, General, but what I carry is the sword of my father. It will continue to serve the emperor well." General Zhang nodded. "You do great honor to your father and your home." It was a few days later when an army of Tartar raiders surprised General Zhang and a squad of soldiers. The general and his soldiers fought bravely and eventually defeated them. But General Zhang was struck down during the battle. The general was losing strength as he was carried back to the camp. He gathered his officers, then called for Mulan to come to his side. "You, from the house of Mulan Qi, you are now general of this army. Lead these men with honor and courage." Then, General Zhang died. Before there was even time to grieve, word came that the main Tartar army was marching on the city of Luoyang, where the emperor lived in his palace. Everyone, from the lowest soldier to the highest officer, looked to Mulan for guidance. She called together the army's top officers and spread out a map before them. Still, no one suspected that their leader was actually a woman. "The army of our enemy will enter the valley from here," said Mulan as she pointed to a spot on the map. "I will divide our army into thirds. One will march to the east, one to the west. And I will lead the third group into the valley directly toward the Tartars." An officer spoke up, "But General Mulan, our army is already smaller than theirs, and if you divide us, we will be even smaller." Mulan kept her voice firm and sure, "Which is just what we want our enemy to think." Before the sun rose, Mulan had one part of her army march to the east, the other to the west. And at dawn, she led the rest of the soldiers into the valley straight toward the enemy. Mulan ordered her men to march in wandering and crooked lines. The approaching Tartar army saw the Chinese army before them. Some of them started to laugh. "Look, you call that an army?" someone shouted. "Just a bunch of untrained farmers and villagers who can't march in a straight line, and we outnumber them. We have already won." The Tartars charged. "Now!" Mulan shouted. Immediately, her soldiers formed straight lines and tight ranks. In perfect order, they rushed toward the enemy. At that same time, from the west side of the valley came the second grouping of Mulan's army. And from the east side of the valley came the rest. Together, as Mulan had planned, they had the Tartar invaders surrounded on three sides. The Tartars were surprised to find that they were outthought and outfought. Mulan's plan had made sure of that. That day, the Tartar army was crushed and defeated. The few that were left quickly fled back to their own homes, giving up their plan of conquering China. The next day, Mulan was ordered to the palace of the emperor. But Mulan's thoughts were not happy, but frightened. "Oh no! The emperor must have discovered that I am a woman. He is going to punish me and my family." But Mulan was surprised as she knelt before the emperor. "You have brought honor and victory to our country and your family," he said. "I will grant whatever you ask." "Thank you, Majesty," Mulan said as she raised her father's sword. "I ask only that I be permitted to return home." At the order of the emperor, a group of soldiers escorted Mulan back to her home. She was greeted by a very proud and excited family that was so glad to see her return. Once there, she let everyone know that it was Mulan, the woman warrior, who had led the emperor's army to victory.